They were still laughing when the fifth child screamed. The broadcast didn't cut. It stayed live, flashing on every cantina screen across 3 systems. Some turned away. Some vomited. Some watched with a sick kind of curiosity. But in the back of a rusted outpost bar on St. Helena Drift, a human bartender didn't flinch. His hand froze mid-polish over a cloudy glass, his eyes locked on the screen. The moment the child stopped screaming and the executioner gave a thumbs up to the camera, he set the glass down, slowly reached under the bar, and whispered just loud enough to himself for the entire bar to hear. No mercy. The room was full of aliens. Hardened smugglers, drunken bounty hunters, and a few local Kargath mercs with armored scales and bladed elbows. They'd been roaring at the footage like it was a sporting event, betting on which child would cry hardest. One of them, a bloated lizard with twitching jaws, turned to the bartender and slurred something in broken standard. "Thought you humans were tough. Guess your little spawn ain't." He laughed. It was the kind of laugh that made men remember their triggers. The bartender didn't respond with words. He smashed the bottle into the Kargatha's face with a motion so fluid it looked rehearsed. The glass cracked. Blood, or something green, splashed onto the bar. The merc howled, clutching his face. His companions stood up fast, hands reaching for holsters. But the bartender didn't flinch. He leaned in, elbows on the counter, and stared them down like he was daring someone to move. One of them blinked, then Saturday. The others followed. The Kargath whimpered on the floor, still alive, unfortunately. The bartender picked up a towel and cleaned the green mess off the wood with quiet focus. They didn't know his name. Just called him the Earthman or that quiet drunk. To them, he was a man who poured cheap synth whiskey, cleaned blood off tables, and stared into nothing. But his name was Cole. And the moment those 5 kids died, so did his retirement. The bar emptied early that night. No one wanted to test the mood. Cole sat alone with the screen still glowing above him, replaying the feed on loop. He didn't blink. Each time it repeated, his jaw tightened more, his breath grew quieter. Outside, the drift station's artificial wind howled like a ghost was looking for a body to wear. Somewhere below the main deck, a shipping freighter rattled through its landing sequence, unloading crates of fuel and weapons for another dirty border skirmish no one cared about. Cole kept watching. At some point past midnight, the doors slid open with a hydraulic sigh. A human woman stepped in. Not a customer. Not even pretending to be. She wore gray armor with no insignia and boots that didn't echo. Her hair was pinned back tight. Her face was pale but determined, and the look in her eyes told Cole that she wasn't there for a drink. She didn't sit. She just approached the bar and placed a metal chip on the counter like it might bite. He didn't look at her. Just wiped the counter and asked, deadpan, "This one poisoned too or just encrypted?" She smiled faintly. "Neither. It's a gift. Thought you might want to know where they sleep." Cole didn't touch it. The woman didn't flinch. She stood quiet for a moment, then leaned forward slightly and said the name only 5 people in the galaxy were still alive to remember. Operator 6-1. He didn't move. She continued, her voice low. "I know you burned the badge. I know you walked out after Tregath. But this isn't a mission. This is personal. For all of us." Cole finally looked at her. There wasn't anger in his eyes. Just a silence so cold it made her blink. Then he asked one question. "How many are still in the cages?" She answered with 3 numbers. He nodded, took the chip, and disappeared into the back room without another word. Behind the wall of bourbon bottles and empty casks, a small steel hatch opened to a narrow corridor with a fingerprint lock. It scanned him instantly and hissed open. Inside was a room that didn't belong in a bar. Concrete walls. No lights. No windows. Just shelves lined with weapons that had no serial numbers. Armor still dusted with red sand from his last war. A helmet with a cracked visor. And a sniper drone that still beeped when it recognized him. Cole stood in front of a long rectangular box. He opened it like a priest opening scripture. Inside was a rifle too long for standard issue and too deadly for civilians. Next to it was a folded jacket with faded insignia, a winged dagger cracked down the middle, stitched over a circle of stars. He ran his fingers over it. Then he reached into a side pouch and pulled out a simple dog tag with 5 names etched in it. Not the names of the children. Not yet. These were older, and they still haunted him. He added a 6th name beneath them. First name. Small letters. Still fresh. The next morning, the bar sign was flipped permanently. Closed until further notice. A few regulars muttered about it, but no one asked questions. Cole was already gone. The drift station surveillance caught a blur moving toward the hangar. The security AI flagged the footage but couldn't identify the face. By the time anyone checked, the hangar was empty. One ship gone. No flight log. No broadcast. And out in the dark between trade lanes and forgotten moons, one human bartender armed with ghosts, scars, and a list of sins began rewriting the rules of mercy. Not with speeches. Not with negotiations. But with precision. He had no chain of command. No medals. No promises. Just one sentence. The last one he said before walking away from the bar. No mercy. The slaver networks didn't just panic, they raged. Cole's message wasn't a threat. It was a declaration. The kind of thing that shook the dark corners of the galaxy where cruelty had always gone unpunished. The blooded remains of 6 hunting parties, the downed ships across the red spires, the brutal efficiency of a man who never spoke more than 2 words, it all created something new in their world. Fear. The kind of fear that spread faster than currency and louder than gunfire. Slaver captains started traveling in convoys. Black market auctions were suddenly shut down without explanation. Safe houses went dark, moving their locations every 24 hours. But even in all their hiding, none of them asked why. They all knew. One man. One ghost. No mercy. Cole didn't wait for them to recover. He knew the slaver economy ran on momentum. Break the rhythm, you break the chain. He traced one of the network signals back to a private transport hub used for distributing freshly captured slaves through unofficial border lanes. The location was a converted mining rig suspended in the orbit of a dead star, powered by thermal siphoning and shielded by corruption. Everyone who docked there knew what it really was. And no one dared question it. Until now. Cole didn't approach with stealth. He flew in cold, his ship broadcast silent, his weapons offline. The hub didn't recognize him until he was already through their first perimeter. He drifted past ducking security, past scanner drones, past watchtowers filled with half-drunk guards who hadn't seen real war in their lives. He didn't need force yet. He just needed to plant doubt. Once inside, he walked calmly through the main floor wearing a rust-colored coat and carrying a simple duffel bag. The guards barely glanced at him. He looked like a courier. That was the point. Inside the cargo bay, he saw them. Rows of cages. Most filled with alien species too weak or young to resist. But in the far corner, 5 new ones. Human. 2 boys, 3 girls, ages maybe 6 to 11. All asleep or pretending to be. Cole stood in front of them, his hands in his pockets. One of the boys opened an eye and met his gaze. It wasn't hope in the boy's face. It was the numbness that comes after too much waiting. Cole nodded once and walked away. He returned to the upper level where an auction official, a rat-faced slaver named Jag, was arguing with a client over pricing. Cole interrupted them by dropping the duffel bag onto the table. Inside were weapons. Not for sale. For demonstration. He spoke only once. You have 1 hour to evacuate. Jag laughed, of course. He called for security. Cole didn't wait. He pulled a flash grenade from his coat and threw it at their feet. The explosion was silent but blinding. When the guards stormed the room, Cole was already in the ventilation shafts above them. The next 20 minutes were chaos. Alarms triggered. Guards scrambled. Cole moved like vapor. Not seen, only felt. He disabled communication panels. Sealed bulkheads. Released all the non-human prisoners and gave them access to the escape shuttles docked on the lower ring. Then he rewired the core power conduit to overload in 40 minutes, tied directly to the oxygen distribution relay. A trick he learned from an old mission no one survived. He didn't do it for spectacle. He did it because this place didn't deserve walls to stand on. Before leaving, he returned to the human cages. The kids didn't speak. He opened the doors and held out his hand. They didn't ask who he was. They just followed. He led them through emergency ladders, past stunned or unconscious guards, to a utility hangar where an old cargo vessel sat unused. He powered it with a backup battery and manually opened the hangar doors using a bypass rod. As the ship fired up, one of the girls asked softly, "Are you a soldier?" Cole looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Not anymore." Then he closed the ramp behind them and launched. The mining rig exploded on schedule. Not in one dramatic fireball, but in stages. First the lights, then the oxygen, then the hull collapse. The explosion didn't need to be loud. Just final. Cole watched it from the cockpit as the stars folded around them. The kids sat in the back, silent, strapped in, wide-eyed. They were safe, but they didn't know what that meant yet. Safety was something they hadn't earned trust in. Cole understood that. He'd felt the same once, long ago, after his own rescue. After he stopped bleeding but before he remembered how to feel again. He dropped the children at a remote sanctuary ship operated by a neutral relief faction. No name. No questions. They took the kids in and offered Cole medical checks, resupply, rest. He declined all three. He just asked for a signal boost. A way to broadcast one message across all slaver channels again. The operator looked at him, didn't ask why, and handed him the terminal. This time, Cole didn't show his face. Just a black screen. 5 human names appeared in silence. Then 5 more. Then 5 more. Each name the slavers had killed. Then came one final line of text. "The last market is next." And beneath it, the same phrase they were starting to fear. No mercy. The slavers tried to retaliate. But they couldn't find him. He wasn't on the grid. He wasn't buying supplies. He wasn't transmitting. The dust mare vanished between systems like a ghost through fog. Every time they thought they cornered him, another outpost burned. Another crew disappeared. Another child transport went missing and later turned up empty with a handwritten note pinned to the console. "Your time is coming." Rumors spread in their ranks. That he wasn't human at all. That he was a genetically altered relic from an Earth program long buried. That he was AI in a stolen skin. That he had a vendetta against the Dominion itself. Some said he was already dead and this was just his memory finishing the mission. They were wrong, of course. He was human. Just not the kind they could understand. Because he didn't kill for revenge. He killed for something colder. Justice. The kind written not in law books, but in blood. The kind that doesn't stop. And now, every slaver knew what it meant when the screens went black. When the signal cut. When the name list started. They knew it wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. One they couldn't escape. One they'd earned. One they deserved. The blood market drifted in orbit above a dead moon, cloaked beneath thousands of encrypted signals and guarded by ships large enough to eclipse daylight. It wasn't a station. It was a floating fortress built on profit, violence, and a complete absence of law. Slavers called it their final sanctuary, a place where even the most notorious could indulge in trade, torture, and terror without fear of consequence. It had operated for over 20 years without incident, shielded by bribes, warships, and the kind of people who didn't believe in consequences. That was before Cole came. He didn't approach the market like a soldier storming a fortress. He arrived disguised as freight, hidden inside a decomposing cargo crate full of frozen food supplies routed through 6 shadow lanes. The crate passed 3 scans without suspicion, tagged for Dock 9, Sector G. The market's security team barely gave it a glance. One of the guards even kicked it and muttered about the smell. Cole waited. He didn't move, didn't breathe too loud, didn't open his eyes until he felt gravity settle and heard the lock disengage. Then he opened the lid, slid out silently, and vanished into the shadows of the docking corridor. The interior of the blood market was nothing like the slaver dens he had infiltrated before. It was luxury dipped in blood. Marble floors imported from collapsed human colonies. Alien statues carved from bones of extinct species. The air was chilled, perfumed, sterilized, meant to mask the rot beneath. Wealth oozed from every wall, every light fixture, every smiling host guiding monstrous guests through hallways filled with cages. Not iron cages, no. These were crystal, engineered to display the captives like art. Children were arranged for viewing, labeled by age, strength, obedience score. One girl was chained beneath a glass floor, forced to dance whenever someone stood above her. Cole moved like breath. No one saw him. No alarms were tripped. He mapped the interior silently with a scanner embedded in his visor. 30 guards. 12 auctioneers. 7 warbots with heavy plating and reinforced spinal command units. Every corridor, every blind spot, every failsafe, he memorized in under 10 minutes. Then he found Rax. The slaver lord sat in a throne carved from the rib of a planetary leviathan, surrounded by buyers from every quadrant. His voice was amplified through the chamber, each word thick with pride and cruelty. He laughed as he announced that the next auction would include the execution of 10 human children, live, streamed across the black markets to demonstrate dominance and drive up bidding. The crowd applauded. One of them raised a glass. Another bet 5,000 credits on which child would cry first. Cole watched from a vent above, hand resting on the grip of his knife, waiting for the countdown to begin. He didn't strike during the announcement. He waited. He wanted Rax to believe he was safe, invincible, untouchable behind guards and money and the screams of the helpless. He let the stage light flare. Let the first child be brought out in shackles. A boy. No older than 7. Tears running down his face but eyes fixed with defiance. Rax raised his hand, ready to speak the first command. And that was when the lights died. The chamber plunged into darkness. Then silence. Not the silence of surprise, but the silence of realization. Every warbot shut down. Every panel blinked out. Every system, overridden. The floor vibrated once. A low pulse. Then the doors sealed. 17 seconds later, a projection appeared. Not a face. Just a shadow. A silhouette with one line of text beneath it. No mercy. Panic exploded in waves. Buyers scrambled. Guards shouted. Emergency lights flickered red but revealed nothing. Then the first detonation echoed. Not a wall blown out, but the ventilation system reversed. Gas filled the corridors, a compound that induced paralysis in anything without military-grade filtration. Cole moved through it untouched. His suit sealed, silent, custom-built for these moments. He moved from chamber to chamber, disabling guards with blunt force or quiet blades. No screams. No warnings. Just ends. The auction stage became a battlefield. Rax screamed for someone to restore power. No one answered. He tried to flee, but the exits were already welded shut. In his panic, he activated a private escape pod hidden behind the throne, not knowing Cole had already tampered with its coordinates. The pod launched, cloaked, fast, straight into the docking bay Cole had mined earlier. The explosion lit up the entire left flank of the blood market. One of the warbots tried to reboot. Cole dropped it with a focused EMP round to the central spine, then moved on without breaking stride. The children were still locked up, but the crystals cracked under calibrated charges planted by Cole hours earlier. As each cage shattered, he handed the older ones small stun blades, taught them quickly how to hold them. Not to fight. Just to look less helpless. He guided them toward a service lift while setting remote charges at each intersection behind them. If anyone followed, they wouldn't get far. The entire station began to collapse on itself. Not in a firestorm, but in controlled implosions. Cole wasn't interested in spectacle. He wanted evidence gone. He wanted every record, every ledger, every buyer list turned to dust. One by one, databanks melted under microthermic charges. Cameras failed. Logs evaporated. When Cole reached the final floor, the mainframe had already begun eating itself alive under his virus. It displayed one last blinking phrase before dying. It's over. He led the children to a private launch shuttle pre-programmed to reach a neutral trade station where medics waited. They didn't ask where he was going. One of the boys grabbed his hand and said thank you. Cole didn't answer. He just helped the child into a seat, closed the hatch, and watched the shuttle disappear into the stars. The blood market didn't explode all at once. It folded in layers, like a tower collapsing inward. By the time the first rescue crews reached orbit, there was nothing left but drifting debris and a signal beacon broadcasting an old Earth lullaby. The kind sung to children who used to believe in safety. Weeks passed. Rumors swirled. Some said it was a military operation buried in deniability. Others claimed it was a new weapon unleashed by the colonies. But those who knew better, who had seen the silhouette in the dark or heard the whisper on their security lines, said the truth was far simpler. A man had walked into the mouth of hell. And he hadn't asked for justice. He took it. Somewhere far from the wreckage, a bar reopened. Quiet, old, half-broken. A dusty screen above the counter played a loop of trade news, war updates, and silence. Behind the bar, a man poured a drink for a traveler who asked if he'd heard about the blood market burning. The man nodded slowly and said one sentence before returning to polishing his glass. Told them. No mercy. The freighter he took was barely spaceworthy, a patched-together wreck with rust scars and an attitude problem. Cole flew it himself, no AI assistant, no co-pilot, just the hum of old engines and the crackle of dead radio channels. The ship had been called the Dust Mare when he bought it from a smuggler who didn't ask names. Now it didn't have a name at all. Cole painted over the hull ID with black matte the moment he left orbit. There was no ceremony. No sentiment. Just deletion. The kind of deletion he used to be very good at. The chip the intelligence officer had left on his counter contained more than just coordinates. It had audio logs, slaver movement schedules, and surveillance clips that hadn't gone public. Some showed children being transported in reinforced pods disguised as medical supply units. Others revealed auction sites hidden behind false trade companies and shipping lanes rerouted to bypass patrols. One clip showed a girl, maybe 10, trying to fight back with a metal rod before being shocked into unconsciousness. She reminded Cole of someone long buried beneath the years and the silence. He spent the first day dissecting the data, mapping every route, every possible hideout, every movement window. He didn't plan like a bounty hunter. He planned like a man with no exit strategy. No one was coming for backup. No cavalry. No support drops. This was personal. The first hit would be the bloodiest. He wanted a message loud enough to be heard even in places where justice had never been spoken. Not just retaliation. Ruin. By the second day, he located the weakest link. A slaver outpost in orbit around a dying gas giant, Vorta Prime. It was labeled as a fuel station for trade vessels, but the real operation was deeper, inside a hollowed-out mining facility that ran on forced labor. Hundreds of children were kept in magnetized cages far below the docking platforms, far enough that the stench didn't reach visiting merchants. Far enough that they could pretend they didn't know. He landed during shift rotation, when the guards were swapping out and the internal doors stayed unlocked for a short window. No alarms. No broadcast. He walked straight through the front gates dressed like a low-tier arms dealer, sporting a forged ID badge and carrying a crate of broken-down rifles as bait. His beard was longer, his face more worn than his files had recorded. Most guards just waved him through, uninterested in another shady weapons runner trying to peddle trash to a slaver king. Inside, the stench was worse than he expected. Oil, sweat, fear. The children weren't visible from the surface, but Cole heard them. Not the crying. Crying had stopped days ago. What he heard was the soft shuffle of movement, the sound of lives reduced to caged routine. He kept walking, mapping every corner, every turret placement, every door code whispered by inattentive guards. No one recognized him. That was the point. Ghosts weren't meant to be seen until it was too late. He found Rax in the upper-level lounge, a bloated red-eyed creature with skin like melted bark and a voice that wheezed even when he laughed. The room was filled with slave buyers, most sipping synthetic wine and talking shop like they were trading cattle. Rax spotted Cole instantly. Not because of suspicion, but because Cole carried himself like someone who didn't care about being there. That confidence annoyed the kind of men who profited from screams. Cole introduced himself under a fake name, offered a sample rifle for Rax to inspect. The slaver poked at the weapon with one fat finger and grunted something about outdated tech. Cole smiled, leaned closer, and whispered that the rifle had been used on over 20 confirmed kills in the Great Rift Rebellion. That shut Rax up. He grunted approval and waved him toward the auction prep room, asking if he wanted to attend the night's entertainment. Cole didn't answer. He just nodded, eyes scanning everything. The auction room was worse than any battlefield Cole had walked. There were glass walls separating the guests from the cages, making it look more like a zoo than a slave block. Children lined the cells, some too thin to stand, others staring blankly through the barrier like they'd already left their bodies. A young boy had etched something into the floor with a sharp rock. Cole leaned in to read it. It was a name. And beneath it, the word sorry. Later that night, Rax gathered a small group for what he called a breaking ritual. A private showing for special buyers. Cole was invited. He accepted. They brought out a child, a girl with one eye swollen shut and shackles too tight for her wrists. She was trembling, but not from fear. From rage. That rage met Cole's eyes. He saw it. And for a second, his chest hurt. Not from memory. From recognition. He knew that look. He'd seen it once in a mirror before his first mission. The exact same fire. Rax handed Cole a shock rod. Said, "Prove it works." The other guests chuckled, waiting for the new guy to impress them. Cole stepped forward slowly, crouched in front of the girl, and whispered so only she could hear. "Close your eyes and don't move." Then he stood, turned to Rax, and smiled. Before the slaver could react, Cole jabbed the rod into the nearest guard's throat and twisted. The room exploded into chaos. In under 10 seconds, 3 guards were down. Cole moved like he was dancing with death. Not frantic. Not wild. Efficient. He smashed the lock console with the rod and the cages dropped open. Children screamed but didn't run. Cole shouted at them to follow the red lights, told them to crawl through the maintenance hatch he'd unlocked earlier. Most obeyed. Some hesitated. One picked up a guard's sidearm and covered the others. Cole gave that kid a nod of respect mid-fight. By the time backup reached the auction floor, Cole had disappeared into the fire and smoke of the east wing. Explosions rocked the walls as he triggered planted charges to cover the escape. One corridor buckled. Another collapsed. Slaver reinforcements found only empty cells, dead guards, and a simple handprint burned into a wall by a plasma charge. Next to it, written in human blood, were 2 words. No mercy. The smoke hadn't even cleared from Vorta Prime before the bounty was issued. Slaver networks, crime cartels, and black market syndicates all received the same encrypted message. A human known only as the Butcher of Vorta was responsible for destroying a profitable outpost, executing 17 slaver personnel, and freeing over 50 high-value captives. The price on his head was obscene, 5 million credits and a guaranteed position in the Van Dominion's private fleet for the one who brought him in, dead or barely breathing. The photo attached to the bounty was grainy, pulled from fractured security footage, but the scar above the man's eyebrow was clear. So was the cold, focused look in his eyes. Cole wasn't hiding. He didn't jam his ship's signal. He didn't change his trajectory. He didn't even switch out his clothes. The dust mare drifted casually into deep space toward an old mining belt called the Red Spires, a place once used for iron harvesting but now long abandoned. Or so the map said. In truth, the Spires had become a favorite place for ambushes, backdoor arms deals, and bounty handoffs. Cole wasn't going there by mistake. He was setting bait. Before he left Vorta's orbit, he'd sent a data leak directly into the slaver net, a fake trail showing where he was headed and when he'd arrive. He even included a hint about having more freed slaves on board, hoping it would enrage them enough to respond without thinking. He was right. Within hours, 5 ships were rerouting. None were friendly. One of them carried a war criminal Cole remembered from his old days in the field. A name that made his trigger finger itch. As the dust mare coasted silently through the asteroid field, Cole prepared the ground. He wasn't trained for firefights. He was trained to end them before they started. He deployed 3 of his old autonomous sniper drones, positioning them in high-altitude asteroid crags with precise angles mapped down to the centimeter. Each drone had been refitted with EMP-tipped rounds and infrared burst cannons. He synced them to his visor. Then he moved through the terrain himself, planting proximity mines and rerouting oxygen vent trails to create false scent paths for any hunter trying to track him. He wasn't nervous. But he was aware. His heart didn't pound anymore, not since the first time he'd been left for dead on a mission that never made the news. But he did feel something sharp under his ribs. Not fear. Not adrenaline. Something like focus wrapped in rage. The kind of focus that says, if I'm going down, I'm taking the mountain with me. The first ship to arrive was a sleek silver interceptor, built for speed over armor. 2 bounty hunters disembarked, a reptilian twin pair with chain blades for arms and no concept of stealth. Cole let them see his silhouette before slipping behind a rock outcrop. They followed. One tripped the first mine. The second died when he stopped to laugh. Cole didn't smile. He just stepped over the burning wreckage and moved deeper into the canyon. The next ship came slower, heavier, bristling with turrets and outdated rocket pods. This one landed cautiously. Its crew was smarter, 4 ex-military mercs with visor-linked rifles and overlapping fields of fire. They advanced in a diamond pattern, sweeping corners and moving with discipline. Cole admired that. So he waited. Let them make it to the ridge, just below the drone line. Then he signaled Drone 1. A pulse of blue light cracked the ridge. 2 mercs vanished. The others dove for cover. Cole flanked left, came up behind them, and finished the job with a silenced dart launcher. Quick. Painless. Unemotional. By the time the third ship landed, the hunters inside knew they weren't chasing prey. They were walking into a war. A woman named Vexa led this group, an ex-Slava officer with metal limbs and a voice like a knife being sharpened. She didn't bring amateurs. Her team moved like wolves, silent, precise, paranoid. Cole stayed low, watching them from the shadows, listening to their internal comms. They were looking for traps. They expected hidden turrets and cloaked grenades. What they didn't expect was the rock slide Cole triggered with a remote seismic pulse. Half their team went down in a thunder of shattered stone and broken spines. The others retreated toward their ship, screaming for backup. Cole followed. Left no one breathing. When the final ship arrived, it didn't bother landing. It hovered low over the main ridge, scanning the debris and ruins left behind. A voice blared over a speaker, mocking him. "Come on out, little ghost. You had fun, now it's over. I've got 10 troopers up here and a missile lock on your engine bay. Game's done. Surrender and maybe we'll sell you alive." Cole didn't respond. He just activated Drone 2 and aimed it at the left thruster. The explosion knocked the ship into a slow, spiraling descent. It didn't crash violently. It groaned like something dying old and slow. He waited until it hit the canyon floor, then walked up through the dust. One man emerged from the wreckage. Scorched. Coughing. One eye gone. He looked up and recognized him. Not from the bounty photo. From before. From a mission years ago. He rasped out Cole's old designation like it was a curse. Operator 6-1. They said you were dead. Cole knelt beside him, calm as winter, and answered in a whisper. I was. You brought me back. Then he stood and walked away, leaving the man to bleed out beside the bones of his greed. By the time Cole returned to his ship, the asteroid field was quiet again. The wreckage glowed behind him. The drones returned to their cases. The mines disarmed. No celebration. No satisfaction. Just silence. He patched into the broadcast network, not the public one, but the one slavers used to taunt each other and make deals. He uploaded a simple video clip. His face. No mask. No war paint. Just his voice. He named the 5 children they killed. Each one. Slowly. First names only. Then he said the name of every slaver outpost on the list the officer gave him. Then he promised they were next. The clip ended with 2 words. No mercy.